Okay, I want you to imagine a kind of cosmic courtroom debate where human nature itself is literally put on trial. That's exactly what we're going to unpack in this explainer. We're looking at one of literature's most profound thought experiments, the story within a story from Fyodor Dostoevsky's classic, The Brothers Karamazov. It's told by the tormented intellectual Ivan to his devout brother Alyosha, and it's this absolute philosophical and theological masterpiece that puts humanity's deepest existential fears right on the witness stand.
But before we really dive into the narrative, I want you to step into the shoes of the general public for a second and just consider this brutal, fundamental trade-off. What would you prefer? To be free but totally unhappy, or a slave but perfectly happy? Now, this isn't just some hypothetical icebreaker, right? As we're going to see, this dilemma is the absolute core of the political and spiritual machinery that governs human history. It actually predicts the rise of modern totalitarianism and taps right into the deepest existential dread we experience as human beings.
Part 1. The Return and the Temptations, Setting the Stage. Let's drop right into 16th century Seville, right in the dark days of the Spanish Inquisition.
Jesus Christ has returned to earth. He's appearing silently, performing miracles, but the authorities, they are not happy. He's immediately arrested by the Grand Inquisitor, this powerful 90-year-old cardinal. Now, to truly grasp the Inquisitor's prosecution later that night, we have to quickly rewind to the 40 days Jesus spent fasting in the desert where he was tempted by Satan. You might remember he famously rejected the first two temptations. He wouldn't turn stones into bread to feed himself, and he wouldn't leap from the temple just to let angels save him. He rejected those to protect our free will, right? He refused to buy our obedience with food or force our faith with a flashy spectacle. But it is the third temptation, the devil offering Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and their absolute glory in exchange for worship, that forms the true climax of our story today.
Part 2. The Error of Freedom, the Burden of Free Will. Cut to a pitch-black prison cell later that night, and the Inquisitor's entire argument centers on the devastating consequences of rejecting that third temptation of power.
Because the Inquisitor doesn't speak out of pure malice, it's actually this twisted, tragic love for humanity. He accuses Jesus of making a catastrophic mistake. He basically says, instead of taking power, you proposed again the ideal, high and free, the freedom of the human spirit. By refusing to rule with an iron fist, Christ demanded that humans freely choose what is right and wrong, guided only by love. But the Inquisitor argues that was a massive overestimation of human strength.
His crucial point is that human beings are simply too weak, too vicious, and too insignificant to handle the crushing existential anxiety of free will. Freedom just brings doubt, rebellion, and this terrifying burden of responsibility. Servitude, on the other hand, that brings comfort, a full belly, and peaceful, ignorant bliss. The Inquisitor literally argues that people do not want to be free. They want to be led like a flock of sheep, and they will gladly hand over their freedom to anyone who just promises them security and daily bread.
Part 3. Miracle, Mystery, and Authority, the New World Order. And this brings us to the Inquisitor's ultimate, twisted solution for all this human weakness. If freedom is basically a curse that causes endless torment, then a truly loving leader has to take that freedom away to make the people happy. So he drops a chilling confession to Christ. He says, "We corrected your deed and founded it on miracle, mystery, and authority." The church is no longer working with Jesus. They secretly accepted the devil's third temptation. They took earthly power to rule the world, because for the Inquisitor, earthly power is literally the only way to relieve ordinary men of the agonizing burden of freedom.
So they replaced that terrifying void of freedom with a new ruling triad. First, miracle, guaranteeing earthly bread and strict social control so people never have to struggle. Second, mystery, establishing a dogmatic truth that completely overrides personal conscience, telling people exactly what to think. And third, authority, providing an undisputed, absolute power that the masses can blindly worship. This triad gives people exactly what they crave, someone to bow down to together, completely freeing them from the responsibility of their own actions.
The Inquisitor lays out this grand political technology spanning all of time. 8 centuries ago, they accepted the sword of Caesar. Today, they are systematically pacifying the masses, even letting them sin as long as they ask permission first, creating this childishly happy, totally obedient flock. And their ultimate goal? To build a universal, homogeneous anthill of peace. I mean, think about how wildly accurately this predicts modern totalitarianism. It's the exact idea that a sovereign power has to strip away individuality under the guise of providing absolute security in a perfectly organized society.
Part 4. The Kiss and the Question, the Final Verdict. Now, as the Inquisitor finishes this incredibly intense, verbose prosecution, he actually threatens to burn Jesus at the stake the very next day.
We're just waiting in the heavy silence of the dark cell for the defendant's verdict. The Inquisitor has laid out this perfectly rational, deeply cynical argument for why totalitarian control is better than the suffering of divine freedom. But the climax subverts all of that logic. Throughout this entire interrogation, Jesus hasn't spoken a single word. His silence is just deafening. Instead of arguing back or using divine power to strike the old man down, Jesus simply approaches the trembling Grand Inquisitor and softly kisses him on his bloodless lips. It's a profound statement. True love and divine freedom cannot be enforced by authority. They can only be freely offered and freely received. It just completely transcends the Inquisitor's rigid logic.
The text actually tells us that the kiss burns in the old man's heart. Yet, he persists in his totalitarian idea. Stunned by this warm, transcendent response, he can't bring himself to execute Jesus. But he doesn't yield either. Instead, he opens the dungeon door, banishes him into the dark streets, and shouts, "Go and never return. Never." Jesus leaves. The system of earthly control remains totally intact, but it's been deeply shaken by a love it literally cannot comprehend.
Dostoevsky doesn't hand us an easy answer here at the end. Instead, he forces us to look in the mirror. As we wrap up this explainer, we are left with this ultimate unresolved dilemma. What is truly the better path for us all? The agonizing, sometimes tragic dignity of being completely free to choose our own path, or the comforting, secure, but ultimately dehumanizing peace of being told exactly how to live? It's a question that defines human history, and honestly, it's one we all have to answer for ourselves.